All right, everybody. We're going to keep going with our wonderful lecture. Let me share screen with you. All right, so we're going to continue on with our quick bread mixing methods. So let me put this in here. No, not insert. Okay, so you guys saw yesterday the this part. So creaming the method for cupcakes. It's a good method. It's just all about preparation and temperatures and measurements. So, sorry. Now this one, make sure I got all these. Yeah. So this one is using the muffin method, which would be liquid or melted fat and dry ingredients. So the liquid fat would be oil. So a lot of times when you have biscuit recipes, sorry. So this is when you do like muffin recipes, cakes, stuff like that. You're going to add a liquid fat to it, which would be like melted butter, melted lard, whatever it is. So it's a liquid state fat. Mixed by hand, you use a paddle attachment, cornbread, and blueberry muffins, pancakes. Typically, when I do these things, I like to try to blend all the wet stuff and the dry stuff separately, so they're all evenly distributed, and then add them, okay? And when you do this, sorry, pardon my burp, you can add the dry to the wet if you want, or the wet to the dry. I typically try to add the wet or the dry stuff to the wet batter. That way, you're not going to get those like little doldrums of dried up stuff on the bottom of your bowl. So let's watch this real quick. This has a quick muffin method in it.
I'm going to demonstrate how to make muffins using the muffin method. I'm going to use 2 bowls for this method and put my dry ingredients in one bowl, flour, my sugar, salt, and baking powder. And then I'm going to stir these with a whip and make sure that they're fully incorporated. And I have some lumps, so I'm going to go ahead and continue to stir it and make sure all the lumps are gone, so I don't have little lumps of flour in my mix. There, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to make a little well in the center for my wet ingredients. In the second bowl, I'm going to combine all of my wet ingredients. Start with the eggs. So I can beat them just a little bit, break them up for the other ingredients to combine with them. The eggs are beaten, and I'll go ahead and add a little bit of oil. My melted butter, I'm going to add slowly so I don't get little chips of butter in it. All of the wet ingredients are at room temperature, so they'll be able to incorporate well with the butter. Imagine having cold eggs hit the butter. You'll have little chips of butter that don't combine into your mix fully. I add a little bit of milk, and I'm going to add that slowly while I'm whipping the mixture also, so it doesn't chill the butter. Once the wet ingredients are combined, I'm going to add them all at once in the well I've made in the dry ingredients. If I add half the mixture and begin to stir it, I'm going to have lots of lumps. I'm going to start in the middle of the mix and just start stirring the wet into the dry ingredients. And as I go around, I bring a little bit of the dry ingredients into the center and just keep incorporating it from the sides into the center. The trick with muffins, you don't want to overmix them or they're going to be tough, or you can get something known as tunneling when they bake. You don't want that. You want a nice fine grain to your muffin. So I'm going to continue to mix these muffins just until it's all combined. You may have a few little lumps at this point, but you know that you've taken the time to combine all your dry ingredients. So you know you're not going to get little lumps of salt or baking powder in it. So I'm going to mix it just until all the flour has disappeared from the sides. A few more rounds, and I've got it. That looks well combined. I don't want to overmix it. Now to add the blueberries to the mix. So in they go. So I'm just going to fold it in. I'm not trying to do a bunch more mixing at this point. I've already mixed it. I'm just combining the blueberries. That looks good. And now I'm going to line my pan with some muffin papers and scoop the muffins. Now I'm lining my muffin tin with papers. You don't have to use papers. If you choose not to use papers, you need to grease the pan lightly so you'll be able to get the muffins out.
So when you guys make these, if you like the muffin where it's got like that white, like you peel it off and it doesn't have any color to it, use the muffin paper. I like to bake mine, or my kids like these, where it gets a little more caramelized, where I just spray the pan, or you could put butter in the pan with a little bit of flour on it, like loosely, and I'll show you guys how to do that. That gets a lot more flavor on the bottom of the muffin. Because if you notice, everybody loves the top of the muffin because it's got caramelization, and the bottom's always just like, eh. But if you cook it where that's got actual contact with the pan, you get a lot more of that Maillard effect where it gets the browning in there. So basically she's going to scoop these out, use the same size scoop, you know, for each one, scrape it on the edge like she's doing here. So it's all got the same amount because these scoops are measured, you know, so that might be like a 2.5 ounce scoop that she's putting in each one of these things. When you fill up a cupcake tin like this, never go higher than 2/3 of the height of your cupcake, because if it gets too high, it's going to overflow when it rises and burn on this pan, or it's just going to make a hot mess in your pan. So you always want to get it where it goes up enough, but it doesn't go out too much. All right, so that's that one. I just wanted to show you guys that. She was kind of a little drag on a little bit. This one, you have making biscuits. So there's several ways, there's several different times you would use this type of method of cold butter cut in. I would use this for pies. I use it for biscuits, croissants. Well, not croissant dough. That's actually folded in, but pies and biscuits that you kind of want to use the same method. So you have those big pieces of cold flour or cold butter in there. So solid fat cut into flour by hand. Pea-sized pieces, use very cold ingredients, buttermilk biscuits, cornbread biscuits, that kind of thing. And this is a really good, so America's Test Kitchen, they usually do some pretty good stuff on here. So I'm going to play this one for you so you guys can see the biscuit.
Although biscuits can range in shape and sizes, they're basically made from the same 4 ingredients. You've got flour, fat, leavener, and dairy. But the hardest to make of all is the flaky biscuit. You have to get those layers of flakiness just right. Here to show us the right way to the flaky biscuit world is Erin.
Yes, I'm going to show you how to make the best, flakiest biscuit you've ever had.
That's a tall order.
I think I can meet it. We're going to start with our flour. I have 3 cups of King Arthur all-purpose flour, and we're using specifically King Arthur flour because it has a higher protein content than most other all-purpose flours. It's close to 13%. The higher protein content is going to give us more gluten, which is going to create more structure in our biscuits.
Okay.
To this, we're going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar, 4 teaspoons of baking powder. We need our biscuits to have some lift, half a teaspoon of baking soda, and 1.5 teaspoons of table salt. So I'm just going to whisk it together, combine it right up. So now we're going to move on to our fat. We are using 2 sticks of butter. It's unsalted butter. So there's going to be 16 tablespoons of butter in our biscuits all day.
That's fine by me.
Fabulous, right? And this is frozen butter. I put this in the freezer for 30 minutes. I'm just going to coat this stick of butter in our flour mixture. And that's just going to make it very easy for us to handle as we prep it. Now I'm going to score 1 tablespoon's worth. I'm going to grate the butter. So by grating the butter, this is going to give us very uniform pieces of butter that we're going to add. That's going to help to create flaky biscuits. I'm going to stop grating at that line, which is going to save my fingers, and we're going to use that for later.
Okay, good.
As you can see, this butter is cold, so it's not melting in my hands, and also the flour is allowing me to really grate it. Okay, so now I'm just going to take this butter and add it to my flour mixture. Now I'm going to coat this butter. And I'm just making sure that each piece of butter gets coated with flour so that it stays separate.
But at this point, you're not really working it in, right?
I'm not working it in.
Okay.
Nope. I should also mention that we're using all butter here and no shortening. Shortening is very soft and it does not contain water. And we want as much water in our fat as we can because that's going to help to create steam as the biscuits rise. Now I'm going to add 1 1/4 cups of buttermilk.
Okay.
Buttermilk is great to use because it adds tang. So I'm just going to stir this until it just comes together. It's not going to come together as much as you think it's going to come together, Bridget. You're going to want to add more buttermilk to it. That's about as far as we're going to go.
Really?
Yep.
That's not
So, yeah,
cohesive at all.
It's
I
not
mean,
cohesive.
just
So guys, when they add the buttermilk to this, basically it's going to activate the baking soda in there, and that's what's going to help with the rise on it.
starting to come together.
So we're going to move over here.
Okay.
I'm just going to flour our board. And as I mentioned, the butter is going to help us to get flakes on our biscuits, but we needed something else to give them that ultra flaky. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through a series of creating a lot of layers. That's gonna
Okay.
help. First, I'm going to pat this into a 7-inch square. Our butter was really chilled. Our buttermilk is really chilled. I want to keep this as cold as possible.
Okay.
So I want to touch it as little as possible because my hands are going to warm it up. The bench scraper is the best tool to use when making biscuits because it just kind of gives you a flat edge to help shape it, and it also allows you to not touch it. So I'm going to now roll this into a 9 by 12-inch rectangle. And I'm going to do that 5 times, Bridget. And I don't know about you, but I lose track of where I'm at because I get into it and I'm like, was that 3 or was that
All right, so when they're doing this is what's creating the flaky layers in there, and when they rise, basically it's gonna the steam is gonna make this push up and give you those flaky layer.
into a 9 by 12-inch rectangle? The short end is going to be closest to me.
Okay.
And again, I don't want to touch it with my hands that much. So we're at 9 inches by 12 inches. You can actually see our little sheets of butter are getting
Yes.
flatter and they're getting longer.
Flatter and longer.
And I'm going to fold this like a business letter. And I really need the bench scraper for this stage. I'm just going to kind of lift this up and flip it over. Promise it's going to come together, Bridget. Going to pat it together into a log. Really press down so that those layers stick. I'm going to rotate it so that the short end is closest to me.
So that was your first.
That was my first set of folds. Now I'm going to roll it out again. So now we're at 9 by 12. Flip up
All right.
and flip up.
I'm gonna go speed a little faster on this fella.
One more.
Okay.
No, 2, 3 more times.
All right.
Okay, so now this is the 5th and final roll, and you can see I'm having to work it a little bit harder. Is because
Okay, so the more she rolls this, you see how it's coming together as a solid dough. And she keeps making layer after layer after layer. So it's almost like this thing, like a piece of paper where those are like layers of dough. And you'll see after she starts to bake this thing, you'll see those layers inside. Okay, and that's what a perfect like laminate, this is actually called a laminate dough is what she's doing with the biscuit method. And she's keeping these whole pieces of butter in there. And that's what's really important when you make these things is because if the butter melts at all, you want to keep this cold all the time. Sometimes if the room's too hot, you want to do like a fold, refrigerate, fold, refrigerate, fold, refrigerate, because if it gets too warm in there, it's going to start melting the butter. Another thing you could do is use I have a marble rolling pin because marble stays naturally cold, or use a marble table. If you use stainless steel, it works, but it starts to get hot, like the more friction it has on there, and it holds the temperature hot. But you can see how she's going to bake these things. You can see the layers like she just showed. You can see them right here. It actually looks really awesome. And then butter, bake them off, and we'll see the finished product in a minute. I'm not sure what they're going to do with those. Probably make some sort of little snack. Oh, very fancy, very fancy. But the point of this is, I just want you guys to see, okay, look at the flakiness of these things. When you take this out, look how tall those end up getting. That is your steam, your physical leavening, just pushing the steam, pushing up, plus the baking soda inside. So I just want to show you guys, we'll probably do another buttermilk biscuit or maybe cornbread next month, Black History Month. So maybe we'll do like some Southern style, like soul food type stuff. But I want you guys to see that method because I think it's really important so you learn how to do that properly. Because like I said, if you dump everything in a bowl and blend it up, it is not going to work out well. Okay, so that's it. I just wanted to do that quick lesson with you guys. We'll keep going on with the international desserts next week. and there'll be 4 questions for you. All right, have a good day.